Yeah, that's a good start. Good morning. Good morning. How are you doing? Well, there was nearly no show at all this morning. About 10 minutes. I don't know what happened. I think my machine must have rebooted overnight. Came in this morning. Everything was hunky-dory. Tried to turn on the lights. They didn't work. Tried to turn on the camera. That didn't work either. All gone horribly wrong. I think there was some sort of software update overnight, but thankfully restarting the computer seems to have done the job. And there's also, you may be able to hear in the background, if you listen very carefully, there is a snoring boxer dog under my desk, just down there. She doesn't normally sleep there, but I think she decided to have a lie in. I'm going to say good morning to a number of people, including Mr. Jim Turner, Mr. Dan Cullen, Mr. Mark Whiting, Mr. Nigel Williams, and Mr. Chris Ford. Good morning, lever pullers and steering wheel attendants. I think that means you lot. Morning, Nigel. Good to see you here. Not that this is aimed specifically at Nigel, but I read an article very, very early this morning from a health and safety company called Havio. I don't know if you've come across Havio, Havio. They were weighing up the pros and cons of CS cards, particularly in light of the end of grandfather rights, which is now fast approaching, just a couple of months away. So I've taken that article, I've taken some other source material as well, stuffed it through, literally forced it through an AI. There's a podcast about it now. There's a podcast about it. I'll come back to podcasts in just a moment. But if you're on any sort of podcast platform, just search for Demolition News Radio. You can listen to it there. Or you can go over to YouTube. It's the latest video over on our YouTube channel. Just search for Demolition News over on YouTube. Makes for some very interesting listening. As I say, the pros and cons, the legality of CSCS cards, whether they actually prove competence or whether they just prove the fact that you've sat a test. That would be my opinion. So, yes, there's lots and lots to talk about on that. You can go and have a listen to that. Yes, podcasts, which will become clear a bit later on. As many of you are now aware, I'm taking the after-show chat, the bit that we now refer to as the Craic. I'm taking that, I'm stuffing that through an AI as well, and that is being turned into a podcast that we're calling The Recap. We've been doing it for a couple of weeks now, and they've been pretty good. But yesterday's was a humdinger. And I don't know what it was. I don't know whether it was just the subject matter or anything. It was absolutely top-notch. So I've kind of done the Craic or the morning monologue in a slightly different way this morning, purely to take maximum advantage of the fact that we can repurpose this. Nigel Williams says, companies making you sit on-site assessments prior to working tells you everything you need to know. Yes, they have no faith in it. What I did find interesting was basically the people at Havio decided to weigh up the pros and cons. And the first pro in favour of CSCS cards was that it makes the life of the main contractor easier. So yes, you as a worker, you need to be inconvenienced. You potentially have to pay a lot of money just to make the life easier for a multi-billion-pound company. Doesn't that make you warm and fuzzy about the whole thing? Bet it does. The dog that was asleep under the desk wants to leave. Bear with me 1 second. Come on, there you go. And that is precisely why they're not normally under the desk, because they are a bloody inconvenience. But there you are. As I say, you can go and have a listen to that. Makes for good listening. I can't remember exactly how long it is. About 10 minutes, I think. Yeah, about 10 minutes. Go and give it a listen, see what you think. And if you're listening to it over on our podcast platform, particularly if you're listening on Spotify, there's actually a poll. That's a P-O-double-L, not a P-O-L-E. And we're not talking about Polish people. We're talking about your ability to vote, basically. And it is quite simply, are CS cards a help or are they a hindrance? I'd love to get your feedback on all that. Now, while you're thinking about that, and without further ado, I'm going to roll the intro, post the question of the day. I am going to roll the question of the day. I'm not sure it's actually up there, but I'll see what I can do. I'll be back immediately after this. Nigel Williams, summing up my feelings right there. There he says, never work with animals or children. I don't have to worry about children, but she seemed quite comfortable. There's a heater. I mean, it's not been on, but there's a heater under my desk, which she quite likes. She got under there this morning and seemed to be quite content to be there. And then wasn't so much. Joe Brown Construction Company just joined us all the way from the mighty US of A. There's a bit of me that would like to know how you're likely to vote in, 10 days' time or thereabouts. But I don't want to open that can of worms, so I'm going to leave that right there. Nigel Williams, thank you very much indeed. Dan Cullen, getting in early with Mystery Machine. He reckons it could be a Zettelmeyer. I'm telling you now it's not. I'll come back to it in just a moment. But bearing in mind exactly what it is that Dan Cullen does, he waits for somebody to partially identify the machine, and then he swoops in the trail of hats dragging behind him, and he swoops in and gets the right answer. Our friend Mantas has joined us. I haven't seen you on here for quite some time, my friend. Good of you to join us. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Now, I've mentioned the Mystery Machine. It's about time I showed you exactly what it is right after this. Yeah, I've just realised I'm doing things out of order, so I'm going to do the intro first. It is Thursday, the 24th of October. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition. In today's show, JCB surpasses a major engine milestone. John Deere celebrates a dozer day to remember. OilQuick and Normet forge an alliance, and Komatsu is with you from pit to port. And this is where I normally waffle on about mystery machines and all that sort of thing, but I've already done that, so let me just show it to you. There you are. That's your mystery machine for today. Dan Cullen taking umbrage to what I said about him swooping in. He says, "Oi, not necessarily. I do my homework." I have to say, the first month that we did the Mystery Machine, Steve Williamson won, and I was very, very impressed by Steve's all-round machine knowledge. Bearing in mind he's a fair bit younger than I am, but he seemed to have a bit of a knack for identifying machines, young and old. But then for the last 2 months, it's been Dan Cullen, and he's well in the lead on this month as well. So, Steve, wherever you are at the moment, I'm sure you're very, very busy. It looks like somebody has stolen your crown, quite possibly on a permanent basis. So there is your Mystery Machine. Jim Turner reckons it could be a Bobcat 3-ton mini digger. I can tell you categorically it is not one of those. I'll go even further. It is not a Bobcat of any sort. Dan Cullen completely misunderstanding the notion of this. Is it a mini digger? I ask you questions. That's how this works. You've been here for long enough. I'm not going to tell you the answer to that. But while you're trying to fathom that out, I do need to remind you of our question of the day, which looks like this. Yeah. Now, my question of the day today has been chosen because it does allow me to tell you a true story, and I promise you, on the life of my children, this is a true story. First of all, the question is this: what is the strangest thing you've ever seen in someone's house? I've already mentioned the fact that there was a boxer dog lurking under my desk. She is one of two, brother and sister. We rescued them both. We went to pick them up from the home of a family that basically couldn't cope with them any longer. When we arrived, there were tearful children crying because their pets were about to depart permanently. And the woman in the house was also in tears as she explained that it was basically her job change that meant she couldn't give the dogs the attention they needed. Obviously, I felt very, very sorry for the kids. But when the woman was crying, I was rather distracted because there on the wall behind her was a full-length, full frontal, nude photo of the lady in question. Now, each to their own. I'm not a prude. The picture didn't bother me. She looked fantastic. Fair play to her. But her kids were probably 8 or 9, I guess. Imagine them bringing a friend home from tea. Oh, home for tea, rather. This is my mum. This is my dad. This is my sister. And over there on the wall, that's my mum's undercarriage. Yeah. But what about you? What is the strangest thing you've seen in someone's house? And it might even be your own house. I don't know. You feel free to throw in whatever you like. Our friend Mick has just arrived. Good morning, Mick. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Nigel Williams reckons that our mystery machine could well be a Mechalak 6 MDX site cab dumper. It is not one of those. Let me show you a bit more. Starting to make Mr. Cullen's guess, his first guess, look quite sensible. Could it be a mini digger? I think it might well be. Let me take it away because we've got plenty to get on with. And we do have an absolute belter of a, if I say so myself, bearing in mind I wrote it and I'm about to perform it. We've got a really good morning monologue for today. So stick around for that if you would be so kind. Back after this. As you will know, I was up at JCB just about a week ago. We were looking at the 145XR excavator, plus a whole heap of other bits and pieces as well. The one thing JCB didn't tell us was the fact that they were just about to and have since passed a major engine milestone.
To produce 1 million engines in 20 years is a real testament to the team that we've got both in the UK and in JCB India.
I would say one of the good aspects about this engine is how well regarded for reliability. I mean, our machines are working in dirt, in hot climates, cold climates. From the moment they go to a customer, they're working hard.
JCB took a decision more than 20 years ago to start manufacturing our own powertrain, our own engines, in fact, which means that we can really develop those to have class-leading attributes that give fantastic outcomes for our end users and for our customers.
JCB Power Systems supply around about 70% of the group's machines. We started producing around about 500 in our first year, and today we're producing 42,000.
During that time, we've gone from very early beginnings, just doing one engine, to now developing a whole portfolio, a range of engines across lots of different emissions ratings, power ratings. They're robust, they're reliable, they're efficient, they're responsive. And that 1 million engine milestone is great testament to the vision of the business to make that investment in the first place, to the hard work and dedication of all the people that have made that possible.
Power Systems was settled to deliver an engine every 5 minutes. We now build an engine every 3 minutes. We've increased capacity from 30,000 engines up to 70,000 engines. We've also got the same assembly line in India. We have a global capacity of 140,000 engines now. The future for Power Systems is hydrogen internal combustion engine. We've developed hydrogen engines in plant using the same facilities as we do for diesel engines.
I think it's probably the right time to acknowledge the part that my father played in the design, not only of this engine, but other engines. He died in 2001. So the engines were running as prototypes by that time. And it's still with us and still winning friends today.
So I think it's really exciting to be part of that journey, to be offering solutions for our customers and doing it in a way where we can also combat climate change and CO2.
This is JCB's millionth engine, a JCB Diesel Max engine. And it's going into very special machines. Just watch this space. It's been a wonderful project, and it has really helped our company to expand worldwide. The first engine was made in 2004 here in this plant. So the millionth engine is really quite an achievement.
Ken, good morning. I agree with you. Fantastic company, JCB. Going from the original 500 engines per year to 42,000, that's quite a growth as well. One of the other things that they didn't mention, but I'm going to mention it, the very fact that they've made an engine that is good enough to be considered and used by companies, manufacturers, OEMs, that they would actually consider rivals. That says a lot. Really is some piece of kit. And the very fact that I've been to that plant, I've actually seen the hydrogen engines going down the line. It's a real thing. It's happening. Just don't know when. That's the only difference. Now, we were talking probably before Ken Hatcher arrived, but I can tell you we were talking about cards because there's a new podcast out about the pros and cons of CSCS cards. And Chris Wood comes back and says, we all know cards are a money-making con. If you can talk the talk and walk the walk, act and speak louder than words, you know within 10 minutes whether it's a BFH time, bus fare home. Yeah, you do. And as Nigel Williams said right at the top of the show, companies making you sit on-site assessments prior to working tells you everything you need to know about CSCS cards. Yes, why are they running a second check if these cards are all they're cracked up to be? That's the question. But if you'd like to give that a listen, you can listen on any podcast platform. Just search for Demolition News Radio, or you can go over to YouTube, look at it there. It's the latest video that we've got there. So, yes, that's got JCB out of the way. What we got next? And we're going from one major British brand to a major American brand, also celebrating an anniversary. Back in a minute.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Good morning to Galvin over at Mostly Diggers over on Instagram. Going back to the mystery machine, Nigel Williams reckons it could be an XCMG XE80U mini digger. It is not. Let me show you a smidge more. There's what we've got so far, and there's a bit. I'll tell you what, I'll go even further than that. There you are. That's the machine you're looking at. If you've got any indication on what that might be, I'd love to hear from you. Ken Hatcher says, done my card, all sorted for 5 years. So does that mean you're now the proud owner of an NVQ? Are you an NVQ type person, Mr. Hatcher? Okay, so going back to the question of the day, which is, what is the strangest thing you've ever seen in someone's home? Dan Cullen says, a motorbike in a living room and a V6 engine as a glass table. I bet they look fantastic. I bet they look fantastic. I can tell you that Mostly Diggers, Garvin has just guessed at our mystery machine, which looks like that. He reckons it could be, what is he saying, a Komatsu PW88MR. It is not one of those, but you're that close. Dan Cullen, swoopy time. He is very, very close. Garvin has just typed, oops. Does that mean he's going to come up with the right answer instantly? I don't know. We shall see. We'll come back to that in just a moment. I'm going to take that away because I did promise you something from a major American brand, and a major American brand you shall jolly well have. John Deere, 75 years. 75 years in the dozer business.
John Deere engineers brought you the JD450, designed and built an even better product. It provides full independent power control to each track for superior maneuverability.
I can tell you we have a winner. We have a winner on our mystery machine. I'll come back to that because my other half has just said my friend has a motorbike in his kitchen. All true. Nigel Williams, question of the day. A full replica suit of armour for a crusader with a sword and shield. Does this person live in a stately home, which would be okay? If they're living in sort of 2 up, 2 down, that would feel awfully, awfully out of place. Mick says, see, Sky News has started the debate on pie mash. God almighty, so many people say gravy. Philistines. I listen, on that basis, I will gladly boycott Sky News. Whatever they're talking about, they're talking nonsense. Liquor or nothing, I says. Now, I told you we've got a correct answer on our mystery machine, which looks like that. I did tell you, Garvin actually said that it was a Komatsu PW88MR. He then corrected himself because he spotted the fact that it was on tracks rather than wheels, and he came back with the right answer. But I can tell you, here we are. What guesses have we got? There's Dan Cullen saying it could be a Komatsu a PC30MR. It's not. He's gone for the 45MR as well. He's gone for the 58MR. It's none of those things. I can't show it to you, but I can tell you that our friend Garvin at Mostly Diggers correctly identified the machine as a PC80MR from the fine folks at Komatsu. And just to prove it, I thought the colour scheme might throw people off. Turns out you're a lot sharper-eyed than I expected. So congratulations, Garvin. You have 3 points on the board. Don't think it's going to be enough to usurp Mr. Cullen, but you've done awfully well. Congratulations, sir. And you know this suit of armour that we were talking about? Suit of armour with a sword and a shield. It's in a council house in Kings Lynn. I'm sure there's a marvellous backstory to that. I can just imagine my wife. You know, I pop off to a car boot sale or an auction, come back, love you. You're going to love this. I've got something that's going to really set this house off. Oh, what you got? I've got a suit of armour. Brilliant. I think that would be grounds for divorce. Dan says, well done, Garvin. Yeah, well done indeed. Let me crack on with the show because we've got plenty more to show you. I've just told you that the mystery machine was in fact a Komatsu. We're back with Komatsu in just a few seconds. You know those expressions like from dawn till dusk, or from I thought of another one just then, from cradle to grave. You get those. How about from pit to port? Ever heard of that one? Komatsu have. Okay, now I didn't see this coming. To be honest, I only did question of the day because it gave me an opportunity to tell you about the naked woman on the wall. But listen, in for a penny, in for a pound. Just before we get to that, Garvin just said, just discovered a leak on my Komatsu just before break, so going back with a bunch of rags now to see where it's coming from. Fun times. Good luck with that, my friend. There's Nigel saying some strange folk around, but I try not to judge. Mick says, Had a workman in my place a few years ago. I had my full regalia for the Knights Templar on hangers ready for cleaning. He asked where I kept my horse. As well he might. Nigel Williams says, I love that concept. Dozing stone into hoppers, not a job for the careless or for beginners. Which kind of takes us back to the whole CSCS thing, doesn't it? There's a podcast available should you be that way inclined. So what have we got next? Oh, I know what we've got next. We've got one more thing to show you, and then we'll be cracking on with the morning monologue, which hopefully will spark a bit of conversation. Back after this. Let me try that again. Back after this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Another one. Chris Ford says, I know someone who has a racing car as a centerpiece in a room. They used to manufacture carbon fiber parts. Back when my dad was a chauffeur, he drove a guy whose name may well come to me, but he was the boss of Reed Business Publishing. And the guy was very, very into music, but not just music for the sake of music. He was really into the whole technology and sound quality and everything else. And he lived in a house near Guildford in Surrey. And he dedicated an entire room to his stereo system. The stereo system was sat at one end of the room. There were two speakers, equidistant, that were basically concreted to the floor, and he had a chair that was screwed to the floor because that was the optimum listening position. That's headphones, pal? Yeah, maybe. Easier, cheaper, maybe. Dan Cullen says, I was in a house where he built his house around a well, was getting water from the well to feed the house. Now, that's smart. I think that's a fantastic idea. I did promise you one more film, and I have got one more film. It comes from the mighty OilQuick. We all love a bit of OilQuick around here. They've done a bit of a joint venture. Have a look. X-Quick. You heard about it here first. Maybe. You may have spotted it somewhere else. Mick says, okay, so we've now got politicians talking about pie and mash. So happy they think it is an important issue. Sod the Middle East and the way that Great Britain is falling apart. To be honest, if we were to rank issues in the world, that's how I'd do it. Pie and mash at the top. The rest of it, not so worried about it. Reliance on men means we need to do better than rely on plastic cards to prove competency. But laziness has led to cards, and keeping men self-employed means they're expendable resources and given as much considerations as a Bic biro. And therein lies one of the issues, which, as I say, listen to the podcast. I'm not going to bore you with it now, but therein lies one of the issues. We have seen over the past decade or decade and a bit this notion of pushing more and more men and women off the books and pushing them into self-employment or recruitment through recruitment agencies and that kind of thing, which basically means that the onus is upon them to maintain their training, which is an additional cost. It also means, if you're sitting a training course, if you're going to go and do your NVQ, you've got to give up a day, 2 days, whatever it might take to do that NVQ. Completely unfair. And it's bearing in mind it is not a legal requirement. You are doing that. If you're one of those people that has done that and is required to do that, you are doing it purely for the convenience of somebody that will pick you up and put you down like a hot brick. Chris Ford says, my house was spring-fed until 1965. Still have the well that collected the water. It's never stopped running. Fantastic. How does it taste? How does it taste? Spring water. Is it good? Is it cold? Bet it is. Dan Carroll says, in our house at Homeless, have a study full of books and a room for musical instruments and 10 bedrooms, 3 open fireplaces with back boilers to heat 20 radiators, no gas, no oil needed, just turf timber. Nice. I bet that smells fantastic as well. Yes, I'm going to roll the end of show stinger in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into today's morning monologue. I would urge you to stick around because, as I say, thanks to your comments and your feedback yesterday, yesterday's episode of the recap was an absolute stonker, so I'm hoping we can do that again. If you can't stick around, do please look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues, and I hope to see you again very, very soon. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I shall return forthwith, and henceforth, immediately after this. We already know that falls from height are consistently one of the biggest killers in the demolition and construction industry. But we continue to insist that men and women work at height. We know that workers are injured, maimed and killed by heavy equipment. Yet we still plan our projects in a way that requires men and machines to work in dangerously close proximity. We know that working on demolition sites requires a certain degree of competence, but we continually forego real competence and replace it with a plastic card that proves merely that someone can pass a test in a classroom. So, with all that being said, just how committed is the industry to the safety of those working on our sites? And I ask this for a very specific reason, which I will get to in just a moment. But first, I'd like you to think about your car for just a second. Your car almost certainly has seatbelts, airbags, ABS braking, impact protection, and a whole host of other features designed to keep you and your passengers safe. You didn't ask for those features, and there was no option to have them removed. On the road, safety features are not an option, they're a legal requirement. Off-road, however, and on demolition and construction sites, it seems that every safety feature is offered as an option. And it's down to the owner of the machine. Does he want to pay the extra to ensure the safety of the person driving the machine or those around him? Or would he prefer to keep the money in his pocket and his fingers crossed in the hope that nothing untoward happens? Now, this thought was triggered basically by the intelligence system that I saw up at JCB last week. I've done a podcast on it, so I won't bore you with the details, but it's basically a set of AI-powered cameras that provide the operator with pretty much a 360-degree vision around the machine. Warnings of encroachment by pedestrians or fellow workers are also afforded by the system, and it also has the ability to record, store, and analyze near-miss data. This, too, is offered as a factory-fit option. Now, I don't know, because I didn't ask, I don't know how much the intelligence system costs. Frankly, it shouldn't matter. Even if it was thousands of pounds, it's still far less than the cost of a human life. But while there are still some companies out there that embrace IntelliSense, others will choose the bottom line over safety. Should they even have a choice? There are some Tier 1 contractors now that are mandating the use of reversing cameras, pedestrian warning systems, and human form recognition technology. But the UK construction equipment industry is still dominated by plant hire and rental companies. Those companies can't charge more for the presence of those safety systems. So guess what? They don't specify them. And while rental companies and rental accounts while rental equipment accounts for around 80 or 90% of all the plant on UK demolition and construction sites, that means that the take-up of these potentially life-saving systems is, at best, negligible. Now, we could wait for government and legislators to demand the adoption of any and all available safety systems, but we know they move at a snail's pace. How many construction workers will die before the government gets around to mandating these things? I guess you might argue that the manufacturers themselves should just fit the systems, whether they're requested or not, and just charge the customer accordingly. But you also know full well there'll be other manufacturers out there that will be only happy to sell a stripped-down safety optional piece of a kit. Ultimately, this surely comes down to the owners of the equipment to step up, grab the bull by the horns, and just make everybody as safe as possible. You wouldn't shop around to identify the least safe car on the road just to save a few quid. So why do we continue to do it when specifying demolition and construction equipment? Now, under normal circumstances, that's the point where I'd throw over to the chat. But because yesterday's recap podcast was so good, I'm going to try and replicate it by keeping us on track. So I've got a couple of questions I'd like to throw out. And those questions are this. Should machine safety systems just be fitted as standard? That's the first question. Second question is, would an employer that deliberately opts for equipment without safety systems, would that be a red flag for you? Might you consider your employment? Would you potentially go down the road because they're choosing to not fit their equipment with the correct safety equipment? And given all of that, what safety systems and procedures do you believe should be compulsory? There's your discussion points for today. Excuse me, I'm going to go over to the chat. Mick has got to go. He's being turned on to digital, which is good news. Well, water is pure and clean. I think we kind of guessed that, but there we are. Nigel Williams says, but, and I say this as a guy who was given the sermon many times, pay the full price and get an invoice. It's 100% tax deductible. Yes. Okay. See what that's about. AI, humanoid cameras are nothing new, but it's still emerging technology and rapidly adapting to the technologies as they improve. If you want it, Lynch will fit it and you will pay the extra for it. I can't recall the percentage, but it's over 30% of the fleet currently, which is good news. That is very, very good news. And fair play to Lynch. I tip my cap to them if they've got a third of their fleet already adopting that kind of technology. And we've already mentioned that human form recognition technology is now being mandated by Balfour Beatty, and based on previous experience, where Balfour Beatty tread, others are sure to follow. So I think the trend is there. I'm just going to do this from Jim Turner. Right then, this is how to sort the system. Make each plant area of plant part of the UK driving licence category, and any business that employs people has to make sure their employees have the right licence for the plant they're paying them to drive. That's going back to the CSCS cards. Totally agree with that. I don't want to upset anybody about their choice of mobile phone. I think we all know that I'm strictly an Apple man, and I realise we have some Android fans in the house. So let's not do this as an iPhone or an iOS Android. Let's do this as a Mark 1 and a Mark 2. So your phone is up for replacement, and you could go into a shop tomorrow or this afternoon and say, I'd like to update my mobile phone. Okay, so what would you like? And you are then going to choose. I either want the one that does everything, that makes my life easier, it's got all the apps, everything's verified, it's all vetted, or I'll have a lesser phone. Now, you will pay less for the lesser phone, and maybe you're one of those people that really doesn't give a toss about apps and social media and all that kind of thing. Fair enough. But when it comes down to safety, you wouldn't do that same thing with a car. Imagine going into your local Ford dealership or your Toyota dealership, your Nissan, whoever, and saying, hey, I'm in the market for a car. Yes, sir. What would you like? I don't care what model it is. I don't care about that. Just make sure that it's as unsafe as possible. I want the seat belts taken out. I don't want ABS braking. I don't want any of that nonsense. It just gets in the way. You wouldn't do that. And yet, at the point of purchase of plant and equipment, that is an actual decision that people are making, people and companies are making. They have the opportunity to say, yes, I want to be sure that my people and those around them, not just the people in the machine, but those around them, going back to the reversing cameras and everything else, I want my sites to be as safe as possible. I'm willing to pay a little bit more to make sure that happens. And what they're actually doing is, nope, I'll pass on all of that and I'll keep my fingers crossed. So going back to the questions that I had, if you were one of those, if you're working for a company and that, you know, your boss comes along and says, good news, fellas, you're getting a new excavator next week. Fantastic. What is it? Oh, it's a Volvo. Oh, fantastic. I'm absolutely made up with that. All mod cons? Some of them. Okay, so what hasn't it got? Well, we decided not to have the reversing cameras because they were a bit pricey. We bailed on that. Oh, okay. Rops cab? Yeah, see, that was quite pricey too. So no, we've lopped that off as well. What would you do if you were employed by a company that would do that? Would you bail? Nigel Williams, I think we've done... no, we haven't done that one. I just saw another one. And many sites, including highways, mandate not just AI humanoid recognition, but height slew and RCI as standard for hired implant, as it should be. Is it not the case that the main contractor will not pay a proper rate so a company will fit the extra equipment, as history proves that the subcontractor has to bear their cost at no extra rate? Take road haulage companies that invested in walking floor trailers. They got a premium until there was a drop-off in work, then the rate was reduced to that of a standard tipping trailer. And herein lies an issue. This is something I was completely unrelated to this, but something I was discussing with Marcus Clay up at Digbits last week about the fact that higher rates for construction equipment rise and fall. They fluctuate based on demand. But what I find remarkable about them is that they seem to return to a price that is 10, 15, 20 years old. And I'm not, let's just say, the higher rate for a backhoe loader is, I don't know, 150 quid or whatever it might be. And it might go up to 160, 170. It could go up to 200 quid. But then there's a downturn in work, and it goes back to 150. And then when times get good, when times improve and things are booming and everything else, you've then got to start from that point again to get the rate up. Now, bearing in mind that the cost of that machine, whoever it's from, Caterpillar, JCB, John Deere, whoever, that price, the cost price of that machine will have gone up. It will go up in line with inflation, plus fluctuations in the price of steel and the components and everything else. So the cost of that machine was gradually creeping up. Your higher rate gradually creeps up, but then there's a downturn, so you go back. So that ability to afford all of these extra bits and pieces, we're kind of doing ourselves out of it. Every time we decide, times are getting tough, it's getting very competitive out there, we need to lock this off, cut it off at source. Every time we do that, we go back to square one. And we're now down to a bare bones price for a backhoe loader, an excavator, a dumper, a dump truck, dozer, wheel loader. We're down to the bare bones, which doesn't allow any scope for things like these safety systems, plus the other bells and whistles that are available to us now. Jim Turner says, the driving license, I nearly lapsed into Inspector Clouseau there, the driving license would last until the holder is 80 years old. Then they have to have a medical. They would have to go to a government testing ground to pass their license. They could learn on site with L plates in the presence of someone that's held that category for over 5 years while they hold a provisional license. So here's an interesting point. Jim, you and I spoke about this yesterday anyway. Jim made an important point about yesterday's episode of the recap, because we had an AI reviewing a podcast with us reviewing AI. It was the most bizarre sort of meta thing. Where was I going with that? Yes, I know what I was going to say. So I've taken some source material, bunged it through this AI today to do this CSCS card podcast. And one of the things that it came up with, which it came up with completely unaided by a human hand, it basically said, competence cards, they don't prove competence. What you really need is to get them to work alongside somebody who's been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and they will verify whether they are good, bad, or indifferent. L plates in the presence of someone that held the category for over 5 years while they hold a provisional license. Jim, you and AI are in agreement. Very good point, Chris Ford. Yes, it's funny that. And yes, the cost of the machine doesn't come down. No, the cost of the machine doesn't come down. Really doesn't. But as I say, when you take into account, the fluctuations in steel prices, in import duties, in component prices, and all of the stuff that goes with it, if you watch it over a period of time, a bit like property, over time, the cost of machines gradually drifts up. Maybe there's a bit of a spike because there's a new generation of that machine comes in and it takes a bit of a leap, but it continues upward and upward. Higher rates do that. They go up, they come back down. They go up, they come back down. And it wouldn't be so bad if they went from 100 to 150 and then there was a downturn and they went to 130. Not good, but, understandable. But to go from the low point to a high point and then immediately to go back to the low point. And it is this race to the bottom that we're so adept at in construction. I think because we work in a very cyclical industry, you would like to think that by now people would be used to the peaks and the troughs, the highs and the lows, but they're not. They're not. When times are good, you see it for yourself. You see people going out and spunking fortunes on Bentleys and Range Rovers and fucking helicopters and Lord alone knows what else. And then when times go bad, they're pleading poverty and they're putting their company in liquidation. We all know what's coming. The industry goes up and it goes down. When you apply that to higher rates, rather than taking a more considered approach, yes, we are currently charging 150 quid for a machine, but times are getting tougher. Maybe we should knock that down to 145, 140. Everybody just goes, oh, fucking hell, fuck, God, everything's on fire, £100. If you can get 90, that'll do. Why do we do that? And what's the knock-on effect with that? The knock-on effect of that is that things like these safety systems are considered unaffordable, prohibitively expensive. Compare that. I mean, let's use IntelliSense as an example. Off the top of my head, I didn't ask because they probably wouldn't tell me, but let's say that the IntelliSense system on one of their telehandlers adds another 2,000 quid to the cost of the machine. I don't know. It might be 2, it might be 5, it might be 1. I don't know. But let's say 2,000 quid. Compare and contrast that with if somebody runs over a pedestrian or a fellow worker in a telehandler and kills them. Never mind the emotional issue with that, which will be basically last the rest of your life. If you're the operator of that telehandler and you've killed somebody, that will live with you for life. But think of the cost. Site shuts because you've got to do an investigation. You've then got to go through court. The court will hit you a massive fine. You might have people going to jail and so on down the line. You'll be fined for negligence and gross, corporate manslaughter. Pay the money. Pay the money. If somebody shows you a thing, you see this thing that you're doing here, it's dangerous. This will make it safer. Pay the money. Jim Turner says, the police would pull on site, do a spot check, all plant operators for drink drugs testing. Any fails would mean a hefty fine, a 3-year ban, having to retake your test or tests again. This way, the operating standards would rise. Site safety would rise and useless work-shy drink drug addled people would be squeezed out of the industry. It's a win in every direction. I've said this so many times. But quite simply, make Jim Turner the Minister for Construction. There you are. The industry currently has a major issue with drugs and alcohol among its workforce. And, I get invited to seminars and conferences and live streams. Let's talk about this problem. Let's not talk about it. Let's sort it the fuck out. This is Jim's being very diplomatic with his words, squeeze the drink and drug addled people out of the industry. Or my preference is fuck them off, because they're not just a danger to themselves, they're a danger to everybody around them, their fellow workers, those working close by, people that are walking by the site. If you're off your tits in one way or another, you are a danger to society, basically. And you have no place in construction. And I know I go off at tangents. It's the same as this thing that I have a real issue with knife crime in the UK. if you are found to be in possession of a knife, and I'm not talking about a Stanley knife because you're a carpet fitter, I'm talking about a fucking machete here. If you're found to be in possession of a machete, 10 years, not even a court case. There's nobody's hacking through the jungle of Brixton these days. There is no point in you having that other than to intimidate or to actually attack somebody. Therefore, off the streets. Simple as that. And Jim Turner's point there about drink and drugs, exactly the same. You imagine, there have been films about it. There's going to be a very good book about this coming out very, very soon. You imagine the amount of damage that you could do with an excavator. If you're driving a car and you have a sudden murderous moment in your life, you might be able to mow down 3, 4, 5 people. You're behind the controls of an excavator. You could take out dozens. And if you're off your tits for one reason or another, you could take out dozens, possibly even more than that. Why don't we just nip it in the mud? In the mud? Nip it in the bud. Peter McKenna says, hello, I've popped on, got other commitments, so can't be part of the show. Hope everyone is having a decent day. Hopefully be around tomorrow. Peter, it's not the same without you, but look forward to it. Peter McKenna says, who got the mystery machine today? I can tell you it was Garvin over at Mostly Diggers. Chris Ford says, welcome to my world. Been doing this for 40 odd years. By the time it's paid for, it's time to start again. There's the old adage that you cut your cloth to what you can afford. Indeed it is. Peter McKenna was saying spot on, Mark. I'm not sure what bit I was spot on about, but good. Is this partial problem to knock on effect to companies going down as materials go up, but never see it coming down either? I think, as I say, I've been doing this a long time, and I get to speak to and interview people all the time, and there are some companies. Think about this from a demolition point of view. I won't name names, but I spoke to a demolition company. Would have been about this time last year, actually. Yeah, about this time last year, and just completely just a random bit of conversation. The guy said, we're not entirely sure what's going to happen next year. There will be an election because this was pre-election. Not entirely sure how that's going to pan out. Things are pretty tough at the moment. So we've already made a decision. We are not buying any new kit next year. And I remember thinking to myself, and this guy's a bit of a plant enthusiast, but I remember thinking, how sensible. You do your math and you think, well, yes, I'd love a nice shiny new excavator, and there's some sexy new ones coming out from Volvo and Komatsu, but I can't afford it, so I'm not going to do it. It's the wrong time to do it. And yet there are others out there who are financed up to the very gunnels. Yes, I'll have a new machine. Yes, I'll have 3 new machines. Ah, yes, new attachments for all of them. OilQuick to go with all of them. I'll have a Range Rover and a Ferrari and a Bentley for my days off, and so on down the line. And then things go pear-shaped, and everything goes into liquidation. Whenever you see a company go into liquidation, it's worth having a look. You can get a copy of the creditors report to see who they owe money to. And it's always, the top 2 within this industry are always exactly the same. It is HMRC, because they owe the taxman a fortune, and the next one is usually a finance company, because they've overextended themselves out of ego, vanity, lack of foresight, whatever you want to call it. It's always the same story. And you know full well that company will bounce back in a week, 2 weeks, 10 days, and they'll do exactly the same thing again. Peter says, Jim, unless it was a publicly accessible site and the police wouldn't entertain doing tests, you can buy the same kits that the police use. You can indeed. The bills don't stop even when the work does. You can't live on nothing. Try not paying the wages. See how long you last. I'm going to stop here, as I could harp on for hours. Hey, listen, I've got nowhere to be, Chris. You crack on. Knock yourself out. We need a robust card and identity check for certain ethnic groups. Dan, listen, I know you've got a bit of a hang-up about that, but this is not an ethnic thing. I swear to God, it's not an ethnic thing. I have seen just as many spurious cards for people of a Caucasian look as I have for people that are not. The fact is, there are spurious cards out there There are fake cards, there are spurious cards, and the card companies, despite the fact that they are raking in absolute bloody millions, they're not doing enough to do anything about it. And frankly, you know, if the cards themselves are considered by some contractors to be so worthless that they're having to do tests, who cares about spurious cards? You know, the actual card itself, somebody that's actually sat it for real, still doesn't prove they're competent. That's not encouraging spurious cars, by the way. There was an HGV driver stopped the other day, found to be 3 times over the drink drive limit. Yep. How worrying is that? Think about the damage you could do behind the wheel of an HGV, and think about the fact you or your wife or your child or whatever could be driving in the opposite direction. Jim Turner says, I've cured 3 problems on my own without any meetings. And whilst I'm pulling levers, leveling a few plots out for the engineer turning up, I'm not an academic and barely literate. It's not rocket science, just common sense. But common sense was outlawed years ago in the construction industry. Stop the bus. I want to get off. I think you inadvertently hit the nail on the head there, Jim. I think one of the issues that we have as an industry is that we have surrendered regulation in all its forms, be it legislative or competence or training or whatever. We've surrendered it to people that don't do the job. Quick football analogy. To the best of my knowledge, there has never been a football manager, male or female, that has gone into football management, you know, as head coach or football manager, that didn't play the game. And I know famously Jose Mourinho was a very, very poor footballer, but he played football and he learned the ropes under, you know, some of the best managers in the world. And yet we have people regulating this industry that have never, ever worked in demolition or construction or quarrying. They're remote, they're academics. And don't get me wrong, there are some really, really smart people. But how do you dictate to an industry that you do not fully understand? And when you think about, I mean, somebody mentioned yesterday, but there was another thing. I think it was Lionel Whitlam over on LinkedIn was talking about CSCS cards and the end of grandfather rights. And somebody said, you know, why aren't the various, you know, I think in actual fact, I think he said, why aren't the National Demolition Training Group doing something about it? Because they're earning money out of it. Why would they reduce the number? It goes back to the point I made yesterday. Turkey's voting for Christmas. Why would the NDTG or any of these organizations propose a system that meant they earned less money? You know, we're going to reduce the number of cards. We're going to reduce the number of training courses. Of course, they're not going to do that. Never in a month of Sundays are they going to do that. And again, they are remote. I mean, how many, we've said this before, how many people that are actually doing the testing and the training are up to the job? And who is testing the testers? You know, having been through a course myself, a demolition site visitors course, it was an absolute joke. The guy that ran the course was an absolute fucking idiot. You know, and he was given the power to grant me a card. I wouldn't have trusted him to walk my bleeding dog. He was a complete pillock. And you've got people in positions of power and positions of influence, and I don't mean like YouTube influencers, I mean genuine influence, who are sat behind a desk, suited and booted. They've never set foot on a demolition or construction site in their life. So how on earth are they possibly able to mandate what people on site do day in, day out? And even the information upon which they're basing those decisions is coming third hand. You know, if you wanted to mend the construction industry as a whole, if you went to the chief executive of Balfour Beatty or Mace or Lang O'Rourke, you'd get one answer. If you went to Fred Dibner or Fred Bloggs working on a site, you'd get a very, very different answer. But is Fred Bloggs ever asked the question? No, they're not. Jim says, Peter, of course, the police would do the checks, as that's the way the industry would be set up. If it was reformed the way I'd do it. The world is not listening, I'm afraid. I don't know what you're doing, but my book says you're doing it wrong. Yeah. How common is that? How common is that? We've all seen the meme photograph, man or woman with clipboard. I don't know what you're doing, but my book says you're doing it wrong. How could you possibly teach demolition or construction from a book? It goes back to the notion of AI. We were discussing this yesterday, which is what gave rise to the excellent recap episode that we did. There are some things that AI can do very, very well. And it is, if you set it a bunch of parameters, do this, don't do that, it will work with that. Demolition construction isn't like that. Literally second to second, things are changing all around. And AI, as it stands today, doesn't have the power to move, to go with that flow. To control the flow of paper and to control regulations and competence and things like that, AI would be very good, because AI says, there's the rules, that's what I do, and that's what I will do. There is no black and white, I would do just that thing. Drink and drug driving is on the rise again, and among professional driving, any vehicle plant, it's high time something was done. Yeah, it is. And we have the same thing with drink driving. I don't know if you've noticed this. Drink driving, in many ways, particularly in this country, is it's like the mental health thing. There is a global mental health awareness day or week or whatever it is, and everybody gets awfully excited. Oh, mental health, and we've got mental health first aiders. Christmas rolls around when, I know we have office parties and work parties and all that kind of thing, but all of a sudden the entire world gets awfully very excited about all things drink driving related. There's 51 other weekends during the year. And I realise that the consumption of alcohol and drugs is not strictly confined to weekends, but there are 51 other weekends in the year. And we basically kind of forget about drink driving and driving under the influence of narcotics or whatever it might be. We forget about that, and Christmas rolls around. Oh, yes, because it would be a tragedy, if Aunt Sally were to be killed on the way to, her annual turkey dinner. That would be a terrible thing. What about the rest of the year? Yeah. This is going on all the time. Peter's just said it. There are HGV testers working for the DVSA that only hold a car license. I'm really at a loss for words. Dan Cullen says, I've seen site management go into Google to see how it's done, and a while later come back to me and said, let's do it your way and see how it works. And yes, it was done effectively and efficiently. Better that way. They're doing their job and got thanked for it. I've got a theory when it comes to demolition. If the method that you're using for demolition requires your people at any point and for any reason to run away, you're doing it wrong. I now have an extension to that theory. If your management needs to consult Google to find out how to do the job that they are overseeing, you're doing it wrong. They shouldn't be in the job, and whoever employed them should probably be out on their ear as well. Peter McKenna says the police do regularly stop people presumed to be under the influence. Also, members of the public can report drivers they suspect of drug driving. And the police do follow these up and pull the vehicle in question. Follow your local police on Facebook. They pull loads every week, and it's shocking. It is shocking. Bearing in mind, I know somebody, my wife's grandmother was knocked up in the air. Broke her hip, broke both legs, properly in a bad way, and the guy that did it didn't stop. It was a hit and run. He was under the influence. Best of all, he was a roser. Yes, off-duty policeman. They caught him. He was prosecuted, but there you are. Jim Turner says, zero tolerance always makes people fall in line. That's what stops statistics creeping up. Take the lawbreakers out of the system for a few years. If they're persistent in breaking the rules, then a lifetime ban. It's just too easy. If it were that easy, why is nobody doing it? That's the question. A tester is only checking for faults, which they could do even if they didn't have a license. Now, a driving instructor should have experience on all types of vehicles. Let me ask you a question, because I don't know the answer to this. I'm interested to know this. If you are, and I realise people hold lots of cars and stuff, but if you are, if you're an excavator operator and you've decided to upgrade your skills to go and do a dozer test, the person doing your dozer test, are they dozer competent? Are they excavator competent? Are training companies allocating trainers based upon their experience and their capabilities, or is it just a case of he's one of our traders? He's actually our mini excavator specialist, but what's the difference between a dozer and a mini excavator? They're both on tracks. What could possibly go wrong? I'm interested to know. I don't know the answer to that. Please let me know. Peter McKenna says bans don't work. There are supposed to be up to 300,000 unlicensed drivers in the UK. 300,000, man alive. I knew a guy got pulled over, taken in, no tax, no insurance, left again in the car, only to be lifted again. Did anybody see that thing on, it may have even been one of you lot that posted it, about a guy who had, I don't even know what the circumstances were. I think he was a farmer, and I think he caught a couple of Herberts and whatever, and he basically tied them to a quad bike and delivered them to the police for whatever crime they'd been committing. And he was arrested. They were set free, and he was arrested for kidnap. I don't know who said it earlier. Stop the world or stop the bus. I want to get off. I kind of feel like that sometimes. I do kind of feel like that sometimes. I think we probably took that one all to death anyway. I'm going to wrap all this up, feed it into the AI, and see what it makes of today's. If you didn't get yesterday's, go and have a listen. It really is very good. You lot sound absolutely so smart, and I know you are. I'm not saying that as a criticism, but the AI really picks up on the fact that you guys know your shit, and reflects that. So if you haven't listened to yesterday's recap, go and have a listen. In the next hour and a half, give or take, the new recap will be up, and we'll see how smart you sound on that one as well. There you are. Get pulled without tax, MOT, insurance. The vehicle needs to be impounded, and the driver walks away. Totally agree. Dan Cullen says, have a great day, peeps. Stay safe. See you tomorrow. Gary Muirhead apparently has arrived somewhere. I'm not seeing him, but somebody's saying, Dan saying good morning. Pete Marquis, Demolition, got arrested for kidnap when he tied a few fracking protesters up a couple of years back. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. On that note, people, go and have a fantastic day. If you do have the time and the inclination, go and give that CSCS card podcast a listen. It does make for very, very good listening. Gary Muirhead has arrived 9 minutes past the hour. Gary, in the nicest possible way, I'll be delighted when you're back as part of the show. It's nice to see you on a daily basis, but we're not getting enough of your insight. Chris Ford says tomorrow's another day, and Peter McKenna says bile indeed. I'll be back tomorrow 10 o'clock for the final show of the week, and more Mystery Machines, more morning monologues, more tosh. See you then.